Yeah, well, thank you for sticking around, hanging out with us some more. I am graced and tickled to have these amazing women on this panel, and you are lucky too. And so, just to start this off, I would just love to know a little bit more, and I know people, but they would love to know just a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jen Thorges, and what do we do? I am the founder, CEO of Simply Lead. We're a social consultancy. So basically what we do is we go into organizations and education institutions, and we do anti-racism work, DEI work, workshops, trainings, anything and everything that has to do with really dismantling current systems of oppression and redesigning them, co-designing them with the people in the room. So we don't come in and tell you what's wrong. We sort of co-design after we've done the unlearning together, and we build that up, and then we hopefully create impact and create more equitable spaces. We do that in tech, finance, and education institutions. And a little bit about myself, born and raised in Puerto Rico, been in education and in nonprofit, mostly in organizing, advocacy, and anti-racism work for the last 15-ish years. And built this out with my beautiful partner over here, business partner Simone, and she'll tell me, sorry, my business partner, soulmate, and I'll let her talk a little bit more about herself, but that's a little bit about me. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. She's so beautiful. I would be lucky to be dating her, but we are just regular business partners. So my name is Simone Egwu. I am the Chief Strategy Officer at Simply Lead. Like Jen said, what we do is really focus on diversity, equity, inclusion with a lens of anti-racism. And the way we approach this work is really we think about the action-driven, the need for action-driven and systemic change. So we don't come in and just say, here's a presentation, here's why diversity, equity, inclusion is important, et cetera, et cetera. We really unpack the roots of it. We get to it and say, like, hey, this is colorism, and this is how it can influence you in, like, really nuanced and subtle ways. And then when it comes to making change, we say to people, like, hey, if you want this to matter, if you really want your organization to look different, you have to take real actions to create real change. And a little bit about me, I come to this work from a long time in strategy consulting, and now I work in global affairs for a big old tech giant, so I have seen sort of the value of DEI stuff from a bunch of different lenses, and I'm really excited to be able to do this work with my wonderful platonic business partner.
Hi, my name is Layla Saeed. I work with the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative. We lead an advanced collaboration to end homelessness in the 7 counties of Metro Denver. I am responsible for our communications and lived experience work. So the best part of my job is leading a group of young adults with experience with homelessness, 18 to 24, not only to advocate for using the system, but to help make it better and more equitable. And also to invest in them professionally and create a space where they feel valued and empowered, and a space that's culturally appropriate for them and meets their needs on a case-by-case, day-by-day basis. Why am I a geek number? I'm here to bring the issue of homelessness into the tech world and hopefully use blockchain technology and the DAO framework to kind of fill the housing gap that we have. We have a framework for ending homelessness, but even if we create a system that houses people quickly and effectively, there's a gross lack of resources. Simply, there's not enough affordable housing to house people. And all the work that we do is rooted in racial equity, because a lot of people like to blame individual for experiencing homelessness when it's usually an intersectional situation of systems of oppression, the criminal justice system, foster care system, and just lack of opportunity for marginalized communities.
Hey, my name is Rebecca Panvala, and I grew up in South Africa. I've worked in Web3 and crypto for the last 5 years, and I'm head of growth at Zerion, which is one of the largest DeFi aggregators and best interfaces. And needless to say, in the last 5 years, I've seen the shifting fluid, interesting dynamics of the culture around Web3. And I think just looking at 2021 and the kinds of people that we have coming in, even just the kinds of people that are at this conference right now, it is so, so different from what it was like in, say, 2017 and 2018. And yet, there is still much to be desired. So I am really, really hopeful about just kinds of conversations that we're having, the space in which we're having them, and the platform that we have. And really looking forward to learning from all of you. Thank you. So I'm just going to dive right into nitty gritty. And so I have ADHD, so I have to so one of the things that I really want to iterate, when I say non-marginalized individuals, I mean, let's be frank. I'm basically talking about straight white men. Okay? That is fine. First off, we do not hate you. To get that out of your head. Nobody's trying to hurt you. Nobody's trying to take anything away from you. And we all need each other. Like, I need you just as much as you need me. So let's just work together. I'll buy you a shot. You want me to shut up? We'll go dance, it'll be fun. And so I just really want that to get across. Nobody's out to get you. We're just trying to create this symbiotic relationship so that we can support each other, so that we can create a sustainable future. That's all. And so, by saying that, one of the things that I definitely want to bring, because we have such an array of experiences and talents here, is that what tips do you all have for helping your non-marginalized individuals support their marginalized coworkers in space? Because I feel like there are a lot of people out there who think that they are supporting they just end up mansplaining or stepping on and degrading their coworkers, and I don't think that it's coming intentionally from a very negative place, but it's just ignorance around it. So therefore, what tips do you have to share with us all on how non-marginalized individuals can support the marginalized coworkers?
Fantastic question. I'd hate to go down the line for every question. I think there should be more equity of voice. If anyone wants to go first at any point, please. I'm happy to hand over the mic. I think in general, it's really about first recognizing that you own some kind of privilege. I think at times it's easy for white folks to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Is this rude? Not really racist, right? That line between this is racist, this is not just rude, or this is not just unprofessional, things like that. But I think it's really being able to understand and being able to be aware or conscious about that sort of racial awakening and understanding the lines of oppression. I think you also need to want to learn, and you want to be able to ask those questions to other folks in the room and not think that you have all of the answers, because a lot of times if you're white and you've grown up in the US, most likely you're pretty ignorant to a lot of things, right? You've grown up in a society that has basically given you everything and taught you culturally that you're superior to everything else and you need not learn anything else. So you really do, whether you consciously or unconsciously do it, have some sort of ignorance. Be okay with that and be open to that, be vulnerable to that, and ask other folks in the room what they need and open it up to other folks.
Thanks, Jen. I love it. I think to expand on that a little further, understanding that, there are folks who have an experience that is different from yours, and that's perfectly okay. I think sometimes marginalized voices get silenced when folks who are in power assume that their experience is the only real and true one. We see that in ways when folks question, was this interaction racist? Maybe they were just being rude. Was this interaction sexist, homophobic, so on and so forth. So releasing yourself from that need to question someone else's experience just because it doesn't reflect your own, first and foremost. And then in thinking in more tangible ways, how do you notice folks being marginalized in your day-to-day? Who is, for example, who is at the table in a meeting? Who should be at the table? If you notice that someone is getting spoken over, use your privilege, your power as someone who's respected in that meeting to be like, what was so-and-so saying? Bring that attention back to them. give credit to people who you're working with who might not be getting the credit. Go above and beyond for your marginalized folks, recognizing that we are the minority. And if you have the majority experience, part of your responsibility is to look that up.
I think one of the most important things that we can do is have empathy and treat people the way that they want to be treated. And we call it the platinum rule. And in order to do that, you have to actually get to know people. You have to be comfortable having uncomfortable conversations about race, about experience, about gender, and just ask questions, be vulnerable. People so easily get defensive because they feel like they're being personally attacked when someone's trying to explain their own personal experience. And there's no reason for that. We are coming at systems of oppression. We're not coming at you. Those were embedded in you. Audre Lorde said, the true focus of revolutionary change is never merely the oppressive situations which we seek to escape, but the peace of the oppressor that is planted within each of us, that knows only the oppressor's tactics and the oppressor's relationships. So each of us, even marginalized individuals, has that piece or pieces of the oppressor planted within each of us. And it is up to us, it's our personal work, our life's journey to unroot that piece by piece. But we can only do that by having conversations with other people, by including them in our spaces, and then by giving them space, allowing them to take up space, and not stepping in it.
Yeah, something that I've experienced in trying to navigate this topic, specifically working in crypto, what you might describe as like the corporate side of things. I've worked in many teams where the majority of the time the entire team is technical, the entire team is white, male, a lot of the time also Russian, which is a very interesting thing about crypto. And I actually feel like, to a question of like what tips do we give, what I found in my experience a lot is that you need to even start in the place of why is this important? Like, why do we even care that we have more women on our team, more people of color on our team, more non-technical people on our team, right? Because I think like under the umbrella of inclusive and diverse, that exists along in multiple dimensions. And what I love about all of this is that we're talking about creating spaces in which people can feel welcome. And something that I've realized that I needed to change in how I was approaching this topic was, this isn't just a case of we want you to feel safe in the space, right? We want to make sure that you're not experiencing microaggressions, that we're kind of checking the boxes on like, are we making sure that we're treated well as employees? And especially in the context of Web3, this is about how do we create space where people thrive, right? How do we create a space where inclusivity isn't just this thing of we have all the people on the team and all the people on the table. It's like, are they at the table and are they thriving? Are they participating in decision making? Are they having their voice heard? Are they contributing in a meaningful way? And I think that like that nuance is so important. Because the reality is that we can sit here and we can have this conversation amongst ourselves, and this is all so intuitive for us, right? Like you talk to me about the work that you're doing, and I listen to that, and I'm like, that is so important. But what I also want to see is how can we make that intuitiveness the same for people who maybe did not grow up with our experiences, right? And I think like maybe this is what you were talking about that kind of a reciprocal nature of tackling these issues, is that the work is not all on us. It has to be something that we do together. And so that's not a tip, but it's context that I think you're constantly going to kind of like, it's like a wall that you're constantly going to rush into, because it's like you can't do work all by yourself, and so much of it is first explaining why it's valuable in the first place.
Yeah, I think that these tips and commentary have been so wonderful, and then I'm just going to add my little stamp on top of that. Just listen. Listen to people. Don't always need to take up the room with your words. Listen. More than you can imagine. Just listen. So my next question, as we are navigating these spaces, and you are seeing your coworkers being put down, and vice versa. Do you all have any tips for managing discriminatory conflict?
Yeah,
Let's start there.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
I want to hear your tips.
Well, okay.
You're the experts.
Okay. I'll start again. I'll start and then you start and then okay, equity of voice matters. So this is a really tough one, right? Because I think what's challenging for marginalized folks is that a lot of times our pushback is interpreted as hostile or aggressive or, what have you. I think one thing, there are first sort of like the cliche, stereotypical things that perhaps like you were saying, Rebecca, are intuitive or more cliche to folks who've been having negative experiences. Document as much as you can, get things in writing, when possible, have a third party to witness conversations. And then things that I think are useful just in interpersonal interaction, because sometimes it's not that simple, right? As getting something in writing or making sure that someone's in a meeting. I like to put questions back on folks a lot of times. Someone's asking me something that feels a little problematic. I'll be like, well, what do you think? Or where's that thought coming from? Explain that to me. Having had interactions where folks have told me I'm aggressive in the workplace, and this is just how I talk. I don't talk to me all the time. I'm like, well, can you give me examples? Like, what do you mean? I would love to understand so that I can avoid triggering you. And kind of putting that onus back on the person who's accusing you of something. One idea, obviously, we all work in different places and have different people and superiors to deal with, but I think taking the energy off of yourself as the accuser, as we're sometimes painted to be, can be helpful.
So cute.
I think to add, that was fantastic. Thank you, Simone. I think to add to that, it's also about really doing the work up front as well in terms of building relationships and trust with the folks in the room. And so I'm born and raised in Puerto Rico. I moved to Boulder, Colorado, in the middle of nowhere. I was absolutely culture shocked. And it really took a long time to understand the people here, the culture here, and go through the process of figuring that out and navigating who you are in that space and understanding what microaggressions are, what is happening in the space to me and to other folks. But I think really, just to go off of what you were saying earlier, just building that empathy and really sharing those experiences with other folks in the room to be able to then have those difficult conversations, to push back, to question, without it becoming some sort of a stereotype because you are angry or you are this or you are that, or you're a loud Latina, whatever is coming at you. I think it's really about building those relationships and that empathy and then being able to push and question folks in the room.
I really love that you highlighted that, because I think that oftentimes the success of that conversation or that interaction, which might be a conflict situation, is really, really dependent on the relationships that you build beforehand. And I think this is where within companies, organizations, having conversations around organizational culture is so important. And organizational culture around some of these hairy and more sensitive issues, right? Like the reason we have agreements is so that when we are in a context of disagreeing, we have something to fall back on. And I see this so often in DAOs, for example, where it's like you're focused on the work that's being done, you're focused on building and shipping, and you're not focusing on what are we going to fall back on when things get a little bit tricky, right? Like, where is the trust relationship that is being built? Where is the listening, the agreement to be like, I might not understand the context from which you're coming, but I'm going to make an effort. I'm going to give you this space. I'm not going to just come with my own assumptions. And that's difficult work. That is very nuanced work. That takes emotional intelligence. That takes time, right? I think, again, just speaking from my own experience, something that I've noticed is that too often in the corner of Web3, where it's like there's a lot of focus on shipping out products and things like that, there's not enough time and money put into dealing with issues of organizational culture, right? We're not hiring people who are experts in these. We're hiring the 30th developer on the team, who's like the 30th male on the team. So I think like just making sure that we put in the individual effort, but also just like the top-down cash dollar or resources kind of effort before we get to that place of a conflict is really important.
A lot of incredible things were already said. So the main thing that I just want to emphasize is that we can only move as fast as the speed of trust. And if we are at the cusp of creating a whole new internet culture, wouldn't it be great if we got it, if we got the equity piece right from the start, instead of having to fight to rework this like 5, 10, 20 years down the line. So I the nonprofit world and the tech world, they move at two completely different speeds. Okay. And y'all are great for that, but at the end of the day, like, slow yourselves down and really nourish the whole person that's contributing to your team, that's contributing to the work. Because if you're not creating a healthy culture from the start, you're just going to have problems in the future that are going to be so much more difficult to correct. And we need to be thoughtful and intentional when creating equitable systems, because we're inherently biased. So if we're not taking the time and intention to deconstruct our own biases and reconstruct equitable systems, then we're inherently making flawed, inequitable systems.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So then, who writes code here? Keep your hand up if you like refactoring the code. That's great. Okay, so if we're here right now, we're writing our code. Who wants to go back and change it? Same thing with diversity and inclusion. Don't build this wheel and then need to have to destroy it so you can actually include people into your process, right? So, and if you're not sure about how to do it, there's no shame in admitting you need help. That is okay. That is why this conference is here, so that we all can connect and look at this wonderful panel that we have. And so I am going to throw Jen and Simone out there with Simply Lead, because that is what their organization does, right? And so, it's okay if you don't know, if you need help, because think about it like this. With a lot of the infrastructure that's been built in Web3, basically it's more or less been built with only kind of one person in consideration, right? So, basically, hey, I am going to make this suit for this male over here. And when that suit fits most of the people that this community houses, then when someone like me walks up and says, this suit doesn't fit me, and they're confused as to why. And so, in Web3, we need more tailors. We need more people coming in and making these suit measurements so that they can be, so that they come with greater varieties, right? And so, but we need to be aware that there are greater varieties, because I was talking to someone yesterday who had written an article, didn't have much to do about diversity and inclusion, but he mentioned it as something that is important. And then he was telling me that he got so much hate in the Reddit thread about the article that he wrote just because he mentioned diversity and inclusion. And then it finally clicked for him, oh my God, this is actually a real thing. So a lot of it, if you are that one person, or the majority of people that this suit fits, you're not going to know about that until you experience it. So it's not even on your radar. I'm not knocking you for it. I'm just saying you don't know about it. And that's okay. And that's why we're having this panel, so you can figure out how to make a suit that will fit more people. And so, with that being the case, you kind of hinted a little bit, who needs to be a diversity, equity, inclusion group within the organization, and why is a DEI group required? And my bigger question, who should be in a DEI group within the organization?
I can start, yeah.
Yes.
So ironically, to answer the last part of the question, who should be in the DEI group, not just the people who DEI is trying to target. Okay? Don't give people a second job that was not in the description that they applied for, because that happens a lot, right? Can you just help with the recruiting process? Can you make sure that we're sharing this in like groups that you're a part of? Can you let us know how we're doing on this thing? Can you just set up that process? That's not in my job description, you know? So again, I'll keep this super brief, but just going back to where the money and the resources go, and it's not just about, don't give people extra work. I also think like for DEI to be successful, it has to be everyone who is involved. And I don't mean every single employee, but like from leadership, there has to be representation. In the context of companies that like I've worked with, there needs to be representation from the majority male engineering team. Like you can't be treating that as a separate part of the company that just doesn't get in touch. There's this very weird gap between the like front-facing company and the back end. And this again goes back to organizational culture. It has to be something that everyone participates in. Because oftentimes what you might find is that if you don't do that work of including everyone in the process, you have a DEI program or strategy that not everyone has actually bought into internally in the company. And you get people who grumble, right? It's like, why are we doing this thing? Why is there money going towards that? Or I don't agree with the effort that's being made here. Or that just has nothing to do with me. That's the marketing department. That's just a branding thing. It's like, no, this is about fundamentally shifting the way that the company operates. So that's my 2 cents. I'll stop there.
It really goes back to emphasizing the importance of this work. I don't think most people realize that it's not just DEI work, it's like emotional labor. Like 1 hour of DEI work does not equal 1 hour of coding. I'm sorry. We have to weight different types of work differently. We have to give people space to engage in this work and then just take some time like to process and just like be in the earth or make some art or do something. You can't expect someone to like have a DEI training and then go back into their day to day. In my nonprofit, we do racial caucusing, which is something that I find useful. For those who don't know what that is, it's when people who identify as white and BIPOC, they split up into separate groups for the purpose of discussing race and power, privilege, and oppression. Why do we separate the groups? It's because usually when you integrate them, it becomes the burden of the BIPOC people to explain what racism is to the white people, and then it just becomes this debate that's just not healthy. And white people also need a space to kind of ask questions in a way that's just unfiltered for the purpose of their own education, which I fully support. So there are ways that we can create spaces in our organizations to really do this type of internal work, but we have to be intentional about it. We have to give people time to process after, have counselors or consultants to talk with and help process these feelings. Because you would be amazed at the shit that comes up in a racial caucus. And it might break your organization apart, but it's meant to do that so that you can build it back better.
Love all of those answers. A lot of thoughts. Who needs a DE&I organization? Everyone, quite frankly, to make it simple. Why? It's a bottom line question. Again, to make it simple. There is invaluable talent in marginalized communities, whether communities of color, queer communities, so on and so forth. I could throw in several anecdotes or little jokes about how nobody knows a black woman that doesn't have at least 3 jobs. We work hard. And LOL, sometimes y'all pay us less. So all this to say, there is tons of value and tons of talent in these communities that, quite frankly, is getting missed out on by just ignoring them. And whether the ignoring is intentional or subconscious, this is actually something that we do at Simply Lead that we think really hard about. Whether it's intentional or subconscious, it still creates a loss for your organization. We worked with a really large Fortune 500 company that was losing contracts because they could not present a team to clients that was representative of the client's experience. And we had to come in and figure out, why can't you do that? Oh, you're lacking people of color. Why are you lacking people of color? Over the course of this engagement, it came down to their recruiting tactics. They had set a 3.5 as their GPA requirement for recruiting folks out of college. Totally fine. I mean, we can unpack on GPA. It's not the best measure of talent, but that's not the scale. And there's a ton of statistics and evidence as to why it's difficult for marginalized communities to hit those 3.5 or whatever arbitrary measures of success we assign. Whether it's, I had to work a job while I was studying. I couldn't devote 12 hours a week to studying to getting straight A's. Or I was on scholarship and that required me to do X, Y, Z other things. I have family needs, I commute, so many different factors. And one of our recommendations was to lower the GPA requirements because it's not a good measure of talent, it's not a good measure of people's success at work, and it opens you up to a much broader pool of applicants. So thinking about systemic changes like that is why everybody needs a DDMI organization. And when it comes to that DDMI organization, I think these two make excellent points, but think of yourselves as non-marginalized folks. A DDMI space is your unlearning space. It's where you come in and you ask questions. Why is this problematic? How can we, and again, making time for that counseling because this is emotional labor for folks of whom you're asking questions. Why is this problematic? What is the systemic thing that's leading us here? Like that GPA requirement. And for folks of color, I think it's a chance to allow them to be subject matter experts because they know what they're talking about, they've experienced it. So really to use that space in a symbiotic way where folks are coming in to unlearn, coming in to take down systems, and other folks are bringing in their knowledge and together building, some might say co-designing, some might say we co-design, co-designing systems that create an equitable future, that get everybody the talent that they need, that really bring the best product to the table for your organization. Long answer.
So much brilliance has already been said. I feel like I can just mic drop. The only other thing I think I would add is that organizations should embed equity and inclusivity within their organization. And I think that a DDMI committee is sort of an afterthought. I think they should, of course, be in every single organization to continue the work, but it really takes everyone in that culture to sort of build in inclusivity and equity within the organization. If leadership isn't committed, it's probably never going to work, so you might not want to work there. I think it really takes everyone together to really implement that work, and I think everything that's been said is all the things, or are all of the things that need to happen in order to be successful. But a DE&I committee should not be a separate space or hub or club that folks are using to sort of say that we do this and check it off. It should be embedded and threaded in the ways in which you function as an organization. And so it's really about committing to doing that in that way.
So we have so much in this space about tokenization, right? And that tokens are great. Do not tokenize your BIPOC people at your company. Do not put them publicly facing so that you can go and check a little box. You know, you're like, oh, that's me, you're on the team. Go us, go team. No, do not do that. You know, this is not about tokens. This is not glorification. This is about building something sustainable that works for more people. And I bet you the more people that you have included in what you're developing with your infrastructure, the more money you're going to make. If nothing else is going to motivate you, let money talk. And so, you know, we're talking about this, and now I know excited you want to go back and check out what your DI group is doing, or maybe you don't have one, or maybe you just started a startup. I'm going to tell you this: you're a startup, you got 2 people on your team. Call Jen, call Simone, help them, let them help you. Okay? I don't care where you are in the development of your startup, even if you're just thinking about it. Talk to them. Talk to everybody on this panel and start making things happen from the beginning. So guess what? You're not going back and refactoring the bullshit you created. Okay? But now, maybe you're in a more established organization, you still don't have that committee. How do you go about requesting a DEI group within your organization?
Where's the mic going to start?
You ask your CEO. You write an email, and and you find a few folks in the organization who want to do the work with you, and you start doing the work. And you invite them into that space with you. You don't wait for them to invite you anywhere. And I think that's where it should start. If there isn't a space, create one. You're in that space for a reason. So use that power and that privilege to push other folks to meet you where you're at. And I think that's really key in building up those spaces. I guarantee you there won't be a CEO out there who will say no to you, especially not now, to start any kind of DEI committee or a conversation or an affinity space. You can start by asking questions like, hey, I noticed we don't have this. Can we do this? Can I start this? And don't let it fall just on you. Again, we don't want to tokenize folks in these spaces, but you want to make sure that you're being heard and that they see that you are seeing that inequity happening currently in that space. So just write an email or ask a question and start it yourself, and then you move forward from there.
Questions like this confuse me because I've never been scared to advocate for myself or what I believe in. But I know not everyone's like that. But it's never too late to start. You have to just call it out. Because if you're not a BIPOC person and there's other people at your organization, they're going through it. They're going through something right now. They're dealing with shit on a daily, weekly, yearly basis. Things you couldn't imagine. And someone has to be advocating for this type of work in your organization. Why can't it be you? Don't put it on the BIPOC people to have to lead this work all the time. Like, yes, value our input, value our experiences, but don't just sit there and wait for us to break and leave the organization. Like, look at who's being retained and who's leaving. People are leaving our organizations because they don't feel valued anymore. 35 million people just left the workforce because they don't feel treated like a human being. So it's not just about it's about BIPOC, it's about queer, it's about marginalized, it's about feeling like a human being. So just be that person, just call it out, like she said, write an email. And the worst thing that can happen, is that they say no. And then you face some pushback and you rally some people together and you write another email. And then if they say no again, then maybe you shouldn't work there. So you have to work somewhere that aligns with your values and what you believe in. And if they don't value this equity and inclusion work, then they don't value you.
That's it.
Yeah, that was kind of a great closing mic drop. I, of course, want to add things up. I want to go back to something I think you said earlier, Rebecca, about like community building and we only go as fast as the speed of trust. If this is something you really want to bring to your organization, look to build a coalition. Look to the people who might be wanting to have this conversation. Who else is of the same mind as you? Who's on your side? How can you show your leader that this is something that your company and the people who work at this company value? And also, what value can you bring to them? I know sometimes it can be exhausting to explain the value of DDMI work, but money sells. We live in a capitalist society. Bring opportunities that are valuable. Here, for example, is a summer camp for Black women who code coming out of XYZ school. Recruit here. Why aren't we sponsoring this event? Like, have those conversations, but also look to get people on your side. Create the coalition. I very much don't think that any of you who desire this work are alone in desiring this work to happen in your company.
So the last thing that I would say is that if you write your email, they say no, you get your coalition together, and they say no, fuck them. They don't deserve your time, they do not deserve your effort, and you do not deserve to be wasting your time with that. Okay? And if you need help, call these two right here, Simply Lead, okay? And value yourself, take confidence in yourself, believe in yourself. Let's all make this shit happen at Youth Denver 2020. Oh shit, 2020. 2022. All right, thank you.